My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran, Sankara, Guru Piranyu, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to continue the 12th principle on effort. And the last time we covered what effort is, and today I want to go into a little bit more detail on what Swamiji means by effort. In Tamil, we say muerchi. So what do we mean by effort? And this is something we covered the last time. Effort is actually a determination to achieve something, with whatever in our lives. And, and that effort we covered many things. As a species, we put in effort to survive, and survival was the, first objective. And then upon surviving, for thousands of years, we became more creative. We started meeting all our needs, food and shelter and clothing, and, the ability to have children. So those are the basic needs. And then things got better. We started, putting in more effort to have a more comfortable life, various, through education, through all those things, we developed very rapidly. And once we got the comfort, we wanted to sustain ourselves, sustaining our own being, our existence, our material needs, our emotional and intellectual needs. So this is part of the sustainability. And finally, we see that there's also determination to achieve peace and an enlightened life. So if, continuously we have to put effort to, achieve whatever objectives that we want. I want to spend some time, and I covered that peace and enlightened life. And I spoke about there are various pursuits that we pursue. We study in universities, we have a lot of prayers that we learn. Many of the prayers we just chant or we memorize, but we don't know what the meaning is. Sometimes we are lucky that somebody explains to us. So ultimately, we want to find the creator that created us. There must be something that is far greater than our human biology. So we have, the bhakti path, where we assume that there is a God that is separate from us, and our goal is to get that grace of God so that we can have a better life. So this is one aspect that, we have good health, good prosperity, enlightened life. So we pursue that bhakti, to give us the discipline. And we also have, there is this whole process of bhakti. Sometimes we have acharas, rituals. And as we go deeper, we see that that leads to vichara, which is self-reflection, introspection, contemplation, and meditation. And that brings us to that spiritual pursuit of that experiential self. We experience many things in the material world, but we also then start asking and realizing that we are far greater than our own human biology. So two important tools that we use is actually the search for truth through scientific pursuit, learning science, trying to understand the phenomena of this world, what happens in the mind and our intellect, and ultimately who we are. That is very scientific, very empirical, very, data-driven. But we also have another pursuit that we, as human beings, do is we have logical reasoning. We have reasoning, logic, and we have this rational pursuit. What makes sense? Whatever that is, you see. So we see when we combine the rational pursuit and the scientific pursuit, we have a better understanding of God, this universe, and who we are. But all this, one needs to put in effort. It doesn't come naturally. For some, it is natural, but many people will have to put in the effort. Even in bhakti, if you really want to have a good understanding or good appreciation of all the bhakti things, we have to put in the effort, not just the chanting, but we need to know what the meaning of the mantras. And the same thing, that if we want to pursue a logical way of thinking, we need to put in efforts on understanding the logic. The same thing, if you want to understand the world from a scientific perspective, we really need to study the art of science, mathematics and science, to understand the phenomena. In that same way, if we want to understand the self, we really need to put in the effort of deep introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation. So everything requires an effort. But the interesting thing is that every time we put in the effort, the more we put in the effort, the task becomes easier. So we all have a spiritual compass. For some people, the spiritual compass is making a lot of money. Other people is becoming very wealthy. Others is, getting a lot more recognition. And people like great Mahans and saints, their spiritual compass have guided them to that self, who they are truly. So whatever may be your pursuit, we all have a spiritual compass that guides us. And to discover the spiritual compass, one needs to put in the effort. And what does how do you know you have a spiritual compass? And this is something that I thought would be very useful. How do we discover our spiritual compass? This compass that gives us the bearing of using logic and scientific approach to understand that God, from a spiritual perspective, from a bhakti perspective, and then the self that leads us to that pursuit of that experiential consciousness. And ultimately, it leads you to the true reality of who you are, God in its entirety. So to do that, one needs to discover your own spiritual compass, which is in your mind. And there are many things that happens in our lives. And I always like to use this like an accounting ledger book. There are things that in our, things and thoughts that make our mind shrink. That means less illumined. We need to understand what that is. We need to put in a lot of effort. If we really want to master our mind, if you really want to attain self-realization, we really need to master our mind. And that requires effort, right? That requires self-exploration. That requires self-reflection and self-discovery and self-development. It all takes effort, right? And we also need to understand what makes our mind shrunken and what makes our mind expanded or illumined. We know there are things that makes us blissful and happy and joyful, and there are things that makes us more kind of, a little bit less illumined, upset over things. So it requires tremendous amount of effort to understand who we are, understand the processes that are happening in our mind. The more we spend time with ourselves, the more we understand who we are. But what is it that comes between all of this? There are human qualities that we have embedded over the years that prevents us from discovering our spiritual compass. It is, things that make our mind shrunken, qualities that makes our intellect blunt. So what are those things? We human beings, nature has embedded, hatred, laziness, anger, jealousy, etc., etc., etc. How many of us put in the effort to really try to discover why we have hatred, why we feel lazy, why do we have anger, why do we have all this? Why is about self-exploration, self-discovery of who we are. And that requires a lot of effort. Right? Oftentimes we know everything about other people and the neighbors, but we don't know who we are. We don't know why we have all these qualities. So every day, every night before you go to bed, you should have a kind of a spiritual compass like this. Just simple. On one side, all the things that makes your mind shrunken, and another side, that which makes your mind inspirational, expanded. So you should have a mapping of your own mind, and that requires a fair bit of understanding and effort to understand your mind. So the question then is that it's on your left-hand side, it's bugging you, it's impacting you, it's keeping you down. So what I'm saying is that to really understand who you are, you need to understand your mind first, right? How do we move all that from that left-hand side, which is less illumined, to an illumined side? How do we transform hatred into love? How do we transform laziness into vibrancy? How do we transform anger into, calmness and coolness? How do we transform jealousy to one that is, absence of jealousy, and etc., etc. As long as we have all these negative qualities in our mind, we will not be able to attain an enlightened life. As long as we have these negative qualities embedded in our mind, we'll see that, the progress of our spiritual understanding of who we are becomes more and more difficult. So what is the process of transforming all these things that make our mind shrunken to that which make our mind expanded, inspirational, infinite? And that requires a fair bit of effort to sit down quietly and put your mind under your inner scope, your inner electron microscope, to go through one by one, why do I have these qualities? And so how do we transform the scars into stars? Sometimes I have disciples saying, Guru, I find it hard to meditate. And I ask them, how has your day been, or how has your life been? And oftentimes they say, Guru, it's very challenging, a lot of worries, all those things. I say, as long as you have that, it's going to be hard, but you have to learn, put in the effort to master your mind to overcome these challenges. So I want to take you through an example of how, when somebody has hate, many people say, oh, I am, I'm okay, but deep down there's a lot of hate and anger, jealousy, and all those things. So in this context, what are the tools that Mahans and great saints and sages use to overcome these things that makes our mind shrunken? Enlightenment is easy if all of this is absent. But how do we make it absent from our mind? It requires a fair bit of illumination and effort. So when I mean introspection, what that means is that when the thought of hate comes in, one needs to ask a few questions, right? Don't, create a lot of trouble for the person that you hate. Just ask, what are all the reasons for me to hate this person? Find out, list it down, write it down. Why do I not? Whenever they come close to me, I get upset. Whenever they are in my presence, I get angry. All those things you need to write down. Then the question you need to ask, this is what introspection is to really understand the processes of your mind and the thoughts that are in your mind. So you ask the question, this is where very early in the morning when you wake up, when you sit down for meditation, when the thought is negative, the thought, sit down and say, why is this thought here? What is the reason for this thought here? Is it their problem or is it my problem? And oftentimes they may not hate you, or you may think they hate you, but they may not be. Or maybe they hate you, but ultimately you have the full control of how you react to it. So is it their problem or my problem? But somehow I feel hate, so it must be my problem, right? So, am I insecure? Is it my fault? So you need to start asking these questions. And this is what introspection is. And oftentimes you see that most of it is just an illusion. So your mind, so part of the effort you're doing every morning is your mind starts investigating your relationship with this person. Inquiry starts getting deeper. You start researching and self-exploring. Why is this? Something they may have done. Can I forgive and forget? Or can I forget completely? So this is what the effort is. So this kind of pursuit requires tremendous effort, and it provides you illumination to understand how hate emerges in your mind, how it disrupts you, and how destructive is the force, and how do we remove this destructive force, so that, you can get past this thought of hate or hating somebody, right? And how do you make, better relationships with this person that you hate? Not easy, but there needs to be a concerted effort that as long as this is in my mind, as long as I don't reconcile it, I will not be able to progress in my spiritual path. And if you take that view that as long as this is there, the blemish is there in my mind, I will not be able to attain full enlightenment. So this is the push that one needs to have. And you're able to compare and contrast when the mind was before and after making that. So you made the amendments, say, okay, never mind, and does it change you? And the answer is that, the moment you make up with that person, you see that slowly that hate disappears. A sense of relief. Okay, I can tolerate that person. I may not like the person, but I can tolerate the person. I don't hate them. And you see that you feel a little bit more lighter and calmer, right? Whatever that has been, the person that has been haunting you, slowly, slowly will dissipate or removed. So what we see here is that only in the state of full mindfulness, you can actually move forward. You can reconcile the differences, you move forward, all the baggages drop off. When the baggages drop off, you see that your mind feels more lighter and that meditation improves. So we see that, you would lose nothing, you feel a sense of calmness, coolness, even if you, make amends, and you see that maybe, you can tolerate the person, you don't have to love the person. Even that in itself helps you to move forward very quickly. So it's that self-exploration when you wake up in the morning, that you start what's left behind. Or before you go to sleep, how was my day today? Today I had a misunderstanding, or, had a thought that I hate somebody. Before you go to bed, say, why is it there? How is it there? And slowly, slowly, you see that, by the time you wake up in the morning, it's probably resolved. So what we see here is that the spiritual compass, knowing the bhakti knowledge, there's something far greater in us, and that self-knowledge through the practice of logic and scientific approaches, we see that slowly, slowly, the challenges of life will start transforming into opportunities for learning. So I want to take you through this one simple experiment. And I'll do two today on the efforts that one put in, and you'll start seeing these changes, right? So on the left-hand side, I said things and thoughts that make your mind shrunken, less lumen. Hate, right? I see many people say, I hate this, I hate that. It could be a person, an event, a time, whatever it may be, right? So hate is a very destructive force. It shrunkens the mind. And one needs to, you see that I spoke about the spiritual compass. When you endeavor to get the spiritual compass, it'll decipher, go in depth on what this hate is. For ordinary person, they hate someone, but they don't know why it is there, what is it, so they engage in it, right? But when you put in the effort to discover the spiritual compass, even before the hate thought comes, you can actually arrest it. Say, well, look, this doesn't make sense, right? So the effort is to be able to discover that self in you, that spiritual compass in you. And this in itself is an effort that one needs to put in. So when one puts in that effort, you see that through introspection, the questions that he has, why did I hate there? Why did I hate that person? All those things, slowly, slowly, the hate that was like a titanic of a problem starts shrinking day by day by day. And ultimately, there comes a stage where maybe today or yesterday you could not reconcile, but some point you see that the mind starts, that the hatred starts shrinking, and you feel a light-hearted. And you say, okay, let's go and make up, let's reconcile, right? So the reconciliation, the first step through that effort, reconciliation takes place, and something very interesting happens. Is that the moment, there are people that you've not spoken for 10 years, 20 years, the moment you reconcile, you see that you step into a realm of a kind of a blissful experience, and you feel kindness, caringness, you feel empathy, you feel, why did I carry all this burden with me? Everything drops off, you know. And this is the effort of discovering the spiritual compass, that you are able to take a Titanic of a hate, and slowly, slowly, as you practice your meditation, get smaller and smaller and smaller. One fine day, say, hey, why don't we just reconcile with the other person? And you reach an olive, tree and, leaves to make up that difference. And you start seeing that, the warmth and the hugging and also the kind of reconciliation leads to understanding, caringness, consideration, the humaneness, and ultimately we see that all that baggage drops off and you feel light, and meditation becomes much more easier. But the core is the effort to discover the spiritual compass and put it to practice. This is another example that is very, very common among many people that hinders them from this attaining that enlightenment. This is one of the thoughts that makes our mind shrunken, is this thing called laziness. Right? After a while, we become so complacent. We have no time for meditation, no time for reading, no time for social work, no time for the family too, right? So how do we overcome this laziness through this meditational sadhana? It requires a tremendous amount of effort. So first find out, why do you feel lazy? This is the introspective part of the mind. Why am I feeling tired? Why am I feeling lazy, not interested in things? And that mind needs to start going deeper. Maybe you lack motivation. Maybe you don't have a mentor. Maybe you don't know the goals of your life. Fear of responsibility and accountability. Failure. Fear of failure. There are some people that don't want to do anything because they fear that they will fail, right? Depression, indecisiveness, distraction. This is something people get distracted. They'll start and then they will get distracted. Poor nutrition. Nutrition is very important. You don't eat good food, the brain gets tired and you've got no mood to do anything. Procrastination, lack of self-worth. A lot of people, they don't realize the treasure that they carry in them, so they undervalue it. When they undervalue it, you see that the self-worth becomes significantly lower. They are highly dependent on their lifestyle, and they are not willing to reduce their way of life or try something very different. And the other thing is that maybe there's too much to do. They overdo the work, overdo things, and they don't have time to rest, and that creates this laziness. And also, the other aspect is low energy. If you don't do physical things, if you don't practice meditation, if you don't do things, you see that your energy level drops. So we see that you need to understand why you feel lazy. Maybe your body has not got enough sleep, so have a good sleep. Maybe your body is not getting enough nutrition, have good food, good exercise, and so on. So that's what the mind starts thinking. So this impacts, all these things impacts our goals. We get be in a confused state, frustration, our ability and efficiency drops. We have poor health. It impacts our career progression. It reduces our memory and thinking power. We have low self-esteem and inferiority complex. So if we don't address this, we have all these things starts manifesting. Right? So what does Mahan and others say? You have to put in your effort. So he says, introspect, exactly what I've done. List down why you feel lazy, right? And then what do I need to do to overcome that problem or challenge? Right? So maybe you have to break away from laziness. You have to eat better food, exercise, meditate, have good sleep, read inspirational books, listen to inspirational people, be a part of an inspirational network that is continuously supporting yourself and others, right? So the mind puts in effort to say, how do I break away from this laziness? And suddenly you see that when the laziness starts disappearing, you feel a sense of purpose and that nature-centric you feel, I feel so blissful, by doing nothing. And you see that beautiful, nice feeling, when you're alert, when you're vibrant, and you start seeing, wow, life is not just this, but there is more to life. You have an enlightened living. There's a nice saying that there is no end, there is no beginning, there is only passion for life. You really, really enjoy what your life is. It's patience, it's all forms of act of, So here you cultivate patience, because you see that you are able, you don't rush on things, you get that perseverance, that, enough energy to push, drive, lead, steward any initiative. And you're so powerful and potent, the mind can cut through even the mightiest rock, like how the rivers cut through the various mountains of problems. And ultimately, through this practice of starting out being lazy, through, understanding why we have this quality, what we need to do, start, using your spiritual compass, your meditation, your introspection, contemplation, reflection. Slowly, slowly, your laziness starts dissipating. You get a sense of purpose in life, a sense of vibrancy, a sense of action, perseverance, mind that continuously pursues and powerfully cuts through the mightiest, the largest rock of a problem to attain that inner light, which we call Paragyoti. In all of us, we are inspired by that powerful force that is within us, which we missed when we were distracted in this material world. So this meditation, introspection, contemplation helps us to reconnect back to our true being. So what Mahan's teachings tell us is that this discovery of that spiritual compass, the I within us, through our meditation, introspection, contemplation, reflection, will give us peace of mind, give us a clarity of thought, a sharpness of intellect, and more importantly, all of this is able to see its purpose and meaning in life to live an inspirational life. All this requires moerchi or effort. I will stop here. Next class, I'll cover more case studies. But again, you see that one needs to put in the conscious effort and intensity to be able to make progress in any aspects of your life. Sandosham.